Hello, I'm Paula Kelajuri. Welcome to this edition of Breakfast at the Barracks. My first guest today is Jessica Methot. Dr. Methot is an assistant professor of human resource management in the School of Management and Labor Relations. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I know you're a leading expert in interpersonal relationships at work. Tell us a little bit about your research.
Absolutely. Well, it really started as just trying to understand the role of social networks in the workplace. And when I say social networks, people usually just think Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Right.
And although these social media online networking sites do fall within the scope of the type of research that I do, I started out a lot more broadly. And some people might remember what face-to-face networks are, actually talking to people. And so
what a concept.
I know, amazing. And so what was really intriguing to me was understanding informal relationships at work. And that came from the recognition that a lot of our professional relationships do expand. We spend a lot of time with the people that we work with. And so I started to want to understand the nuances of these informal relationships, these friendship networks that underlie the formal structure of an organization. And so I started to try to understand what the characteristics of those relationships are, how important they are to people at work. A lot of people are familiar with that Gallup poll that companies use all over the place to try to measure employees' engagement in work. And one of those questions is, do you have a best friend at work? And so we know that these kinds of relationships are really important. They're really salient to employees. They impact the way that we feel about our jobs. They impact the experiences that we have at work. And so I wanted to know what they were doing to affect employees' behaviors and attitudes. So I started to do research in that area, just kind of delving into the types of relationships that people had and what they meant to them. And it became really interesting. I think people tend to, and managers tend to, see friendships at work in a really negative light. It's distracting. We don't want people chatting off, when they should be doing work. And what I found is that there are some negatives, but they were largely offset by the positives. So we're able to use these relationships for a really good source of social support, people that we can vent our frustrations to at happy hour. These are really good, useful resources. But one of the things that I started to realize also is that we do have these informal networks, and that's the way that work is really getting done. So other research does show that, and we can all probably attest to this, we tend to want to approach our friends at work if we have a work-related question, rather than going to the person who's the more competent one, but who we may not get along with as well. And so we see these patterns of information sharing not mirroring the formal structure of the organizational hierarchy. But a lot of managers are overlooking that. And so they're not really utilizing these underlying informal networks in the best way that they can, and still relying really heavily on these formal structures. So there's a good way that we can go with this.
So let me see if I'm understanding this.
Sure.
So is it better for managers then to facilitate? Should we be doing more happy hours? Should we be getting people to
Sure,
hang
that's
out
a
more?
really great question, and it's a very common question that I get. What my research tends to show is friendships are good if you're also interdependently working with that person. So if this is someone that you really can utilize as a work-related resource as well, then those become the really trusting relationships, the really beneficial relationships, the instrumental relationships that we can draw on for work support, but they can also empathize when things are kind of going wrong at work. And if you just foster friendships outside of working within the same department or the same project team, those are the types of relationships that tend to be the most distracting. So we don't want to blanketly say organizations should foster friendships. They are good, but they tend to be more positive when it's fostered between people that you are working with and relying on to do your work, rather than just everyone in the workplace.
Okay. So how did you become interested in this? Because this is kind of a unique topic.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Prior to moving to New Jersey, I lived in Florida, and my husband and I owned a number of restaurants. And witnessing employee interactions is in and of itself a fascinating thing to see. But one of the things that I started to realize from a manager's perspective, of course, we're all always concerned with understanding what makes employees perform better, what keeps them motivated, what keeps them happy. So we were doing all of the typical things that managers managers try to do. We were investing in them. We were, paying them well. We were trying to keep them happy. But we noticed huge variations in their performance. Some of them would come to work and just not do as well. And so what I started to notice is there were these groupings, these little cliques of people that just wanted to work together. They would request to be scheduled together. And when they in fact did work together, we had an enormously better shift altogether. These friends, these people who enjoyed working together would come earlier to work. They would spend time longer there. They were happier. They were less likely to turn over. They were working harder because they provided help to each other. There was a lot of reciprocity. They knew they could go to this person, ask for some assistance, and their friend would give it to them.
Oh, interesting.
Versus these more contentious relationships,
Sure.
they don't go out of their way for you. And so I started witnessing these things and just became really interested in understanding why this was happening. And our friendship actually is bad, as people tend to think they are at work, and it turns out they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of team effectiveness and fostering team effectiveness.
Sure.
Do you do some consulting work? Have you worked with organizations? How do you see this play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, we're doing a really interesting study right now. A lot of work that's being done is becoming more collaborative. So the tasks are requiring a lot more social interaction. We're seeing organizations restructure into teams. So people are really relying very heavily on other people versus more traditional independent work that's been done. And so teams are really important. We want to understand where these informal relationships play a role, how they impact team processes, are they beneficial, do they create cohesion? And so we've actually taken this a step further, and we're looking at how team interactions, and particularly these kinds of friendships or informal relationships, impact dangerous situations. So we're actually doing a study right now with cave divers, which is really interesting. So these are underwater cave divers, and they team out to do these projects where they're going through these underwater cave explorations and trying to map out these different pathways in the caves, but it's a very dangerous project to work on. And so we're trying to understand how the benefit of these informal relationships can improve trust, can improve communication, and in the end, ultimately improve safety. So we're working on trying to improve the safety of these underwater cave diving teams. So that's been fascinating. I haven't been able to go on an underwater cave dive yet, but it's been fun as part of the team now.
So let's go there. So you spend time with these cave diving teams.
Yes.
What do you encourage? Do you encourage FaceTime? Do you encourage them to sit around and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So it does tend to be better when they
natural?
just get to know each other a little bit better. Some of these teams are just put together by an association that they're joined with. They all have similar backgrounds, but they don't know each other beforehand. And we would recommend that they spend a little bit of time together, go to happy hour together, get to know each other, and that facilitates a common language. The more that you can understand each other, understand the jargon that's used, understand the way that someone communicates, the safer the experience is going to be. So absolutely, there's a big role for these informal relationships in these teams, particularly in the area of trust.
Wow. And is there an application for your research for students, to help our students maybe get more out of their college experience?
You know, this research is going in a really interesting direction. And so as I mentioned, people tend to think of social media sites when I mention social networks.
Facebook.
And exactly. And so that's actually where I see this heading. A lot of other researchers in other departments are kind of delving into this area as well, and it's becoming really critical for job seekers and for employees in general. How are they portraying themselves in these social media online sites? And actually, we're seeing this really come to a head right now in the news with the controversy that's occurring in Montana surrounding these employers who are asking job applicants to provide their username and password for Facebook. And so these managers think, well, I can get different information and I can discern what this person is really like if I can look at their Facebook profiles. But they're really crossing a line. And so it's important not only for legislation to be able to keep up with the really fast-paced, dynamic environment that we see social media in, but also for organizations to understand if this is a really important and actually a valid predictor of employee performance. Is it necessary for them to go and find out this information? Do they really need to find out what someone is doing outside of work in order to be able to make conclusions about whether they'd be an effective employee? And so these are the kinds of things that our students and job seekers need to keep in mind as well. Is it appropriate to be asked for your username and password? How do you react in that kind of situation? Be aware of the things that you're sharing in your social media sites, because these companies really are looking at your profiles. And so these are becoming really salient issues to consider. And we also see it in terms of human resource management. These companies are using it as a recruitment tool. You know, they're posting ads for jobs that are available on Facebook, and you can see them in the bottom right-hand corner. You can like these groups on Facebook. And so they're really reaching out to the younger generations using these types of sites to access more people. And we're kind of moving beyond the classified ads and using the social media sites instead.
It's really such an interesting area. So tell me, what's coming next for you?
Oh, well, yeah. There are a lot of pieces or a lot of directions that I would really like for this to go. And so I'm trying to head in the direction of social media and really understand exactly what role this is playing in human resource management. And so one of the things that I do think is important is for us to understand as managers, what types of information do we actually need and where is it legal or illegal? And so, as I said, mentioned in the news, it may not be illegal to ask someone for their username and password, but we are violating Facebook's terms of use, and is it really necessary? So we want to be able to identify what are the valid predictors, and how is this impacting our reputation as an organization to the people who are applying for these jobs. We don't want them to feel as though they're being coerced. We don't want them to feel as though they're being pressured to get a job by providing this personal information, and that we're really drawing more broad conclusions about them and who they are and how they can do their job effectively, rather than relying on things like social media. So I'd like to go in that direction as well, and I'm thinking that it's going to be a fascinating area to go into.
And growing. So when you talk to HR managers, do you encourage them when they're interviewing someone to look for someone with great social skills? Because if they have great social skills, they'll become part of that community and they'll be a better team player.
That is a great question. And that's actually why the work that I do is so disparate in terms of focusing on face-to-face networks versus focusing on online social networks. Younger generations are interacting very differently now. We're seeing this trend away from very good interpersonal social skills and towards very good online social skills. So we've got all of these online friends, but they're maybe not as adept at interacting face-to-face. But what managers might be interested in understanding is it really necessary to be able to communicate face-to-face? If a lot of what we're seeing now beyond Facebook, we're seeing a lot of these social media sites like Yammer that are intended for, interesting name. So it's very similar to Facebook in that it shares these kinds of profiles. You can post on other people's sites. And for information sharing and dissemination, but it also allows for collaboration. It's intended to be able to create groups and facilitate knowledge sharing, knowledge building. And so what's great about these sites is that you can actually identify where expertise lies, not only in your organization, but in a broader industry. So rather than just going to your friend who's in the cubicle next to you and saying, hey, I've got a question, you can go on these sites and be able to identify, almost in a communities of practice sort of way, where someone has this expertise in the world. So we're really seeing this broader, more global application of these media sites. And so maybe face-to-face communication isn't as important anymore. So it's not as necessary to say, look for people who have great face-to-face communication. If they have friends, that's wonderful. Great that they can work with these people, foster trust, have cohesion in these teams. But being able to rely on these skills that younger generations have developed in relying so heavily on technology, now they can multitask better, they can have a correspondence in a much faster manner using these very short sentences, short communications. They're used to texting, they're used to limiting their sentences to 140 words on Twitter. So, or 140 characters. So we see them being able to communicate a lot faster and a lot more concisely as well. So there's a benefit to seeing them develop these kinds of skills that's very different than what we saw in previous generations.
Jessica, this is a perfect place to end because I have to be concise, unfortunately. You're doing such great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Tfor you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Breakfast at the Barracks. I'm Paula Kelajuri. Joining me now is Jerry Cukor. Dr. Cukor is Dean of the Graduate School, New Brunswick. Jerry, welcome.
Thank you, Paula. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, this is terrific. So tell us about what do you do here? What's your role?
My role is to support graduate education for those students who are interested in pursuing the PhD degree, our major research degree that we offer here, as well as a number of the master's degrees for students in like Master of Arts, Master of Science, Master of Engineering, Master of Business and Science. So we've got a population of about 8,000 graduate school students here in New Brunswick,
Wow.
and about 4,000 of them are actually in the graduate school in New Brunswick pursuing mostly PhD degrees. Many of them are also pursuing master's degrees.
Now, I think when we think about PhDs, we know they're expensive, aren't they?
They
for
are
big
very
research
expensive.
universities?
They really are.
Tell us a little bit about how that works. Who pays for that?
So the research universities, this community of roughly 125 or so that the Carnegie classification recognizes as being research extensive universities, we all have that classification because we're very heavily invested in this discovery research enterprise, whether it's scholarship in the arts or the humanities or cutting edge social science research or natural science or engineering research. And we do that enterprise largely through PhD student education. The thinking behind it is we're forming this next generation of scholars, the people who will go out and make these next generations of discoveries, who will become the Pulitzer Prize winners or the Nobel Prize winners or the people who are going to push, our discoveries into the future. And those individuals emerge from our programs in the research universities pursuing PhD degrees.
Interesting. And so the master's degrees fit in with that? How
The master's
exactly?
degrees fit in because in many programs a student will come in, so for example I'll just pick on food science as an example because it's a very robust program. There the master's degree is something that is recognized as a form of professional advancement, professional accomplishment. Someone comes in here post-bachelor's degree, secures a master's degree, and that helps them move up within their own corporate organization, for example. Students who come here for master's degree education largely are coming in, as would be the case to pursue an MBA, for example, in a business school, with the knowledge that they're going to pay tuition to get the education that they want. So that's a source of revenue generation for you. And the model that we're looking at right now at Rutgers, which is a similar model that many of our peer research university institutions are looking at, is to use that revenue that comes in from the master's degree and provide that as a form of subsidy or subvention to assist us in carrying out the PhD education. The reason that we need that type of subsidy is that all of us in this research university community are actually competing with one another for the brightest students who come out of these undergraduate schools, and we want them to come and work with us, with individual faculty here, to go on and advance towards this PhD degree. We will provide them with a multi-year package of support. Usually it's a 4 or 5 or perhaps 6-year package of support for a stipend, tuition remission, health insurance, so that they can come here and engage in this PhD enterprise. So it's a very expensive proposition to do that.
It's an expensive investment.
Absolutely.
The right thing for a research university
It's
to
what
be doing,
we have to
right?
do. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, I know you were just in Washington with an NSF council
NSF panel.
of deans like
Yep.
yourself
Absolutely.
from
Yep.
the research
Yep.
universities.
Yep.
What were some of the insights that you were all talking about?
One of the encouraging things is that the National Science Foundation shared with us the statistics from this program. It goes by the acronym IGERT, I-G-E-R-T, so it's Innovative Graduate Education, Research and Training. And it's a program that the National Science Foundation invested in starting in 1998. And their commitment to it was to actually see if through training programs, rather than individual research awards to faculty to do a discrete research project, was to see if this investment in training programs would allow for the universities to sort of break down the barriers that exist among the different disciplines so that students who come into fields like in your area of human resources could actually have an opportunity to dialogue more closely with students from, say, geography or sociology or political science, where they have certain common elements. And the data from NSF were very encouraging in the number of awards that were made, the students that were impacted. And they're proposing some relatively ambitious ideas about national models for graduate student training, where the federal government or federal agencies could become a partner with the universities in advancing that type of common agenda. So there were about 40 different research university deans down there in attendance at this workshop, and we were all very much encouraged by that. In addition to which, we had an opportunity in the day and a half that we were there just to dialogue with one another
the networking.
about the best practices that we have each developed in our schools, to learn, for example, from my colleagues at the University of California at Davis or at Arizona State University, about approaches that they've used to actually come up with creative solutions for these interdisciplinary types of graduate education.
Interesting. So you're with all of your colleagues who are fellow deans at these major research institutions. What keeps you all up at night? What are some of the big concerns that you all have?
Probably the largest concern that we have right now, at least for those of us that are state-funded, historically state-associated research universities, is that there are pressures on the state as an entity, as a partner in this entire enterprise, has gradually reached a point where more and more and more and more dollars are being withdrawn from state support of the public research universities. There are just so many pressures on the states right now for other things that they have to do with social welfare and supporting, transportation systems, that the state university is relying more and more on tuition as its source of revenue, as well as endowment funds as its source of revenue. And given what I just shared with you earlier about the costs associated with these research degrees, yet that they're a constitutive element of our mission as research universities, our struggle at the moment is to figure out what the new business model is going to look like. What's the new approach that we're going to be able to come up with to continue with this very important enterprise for us that's of great benefit to New Jersey as a state, to the entire nation in terms of where these students will go and the impact that they will have. So we all stay up at night in terms of anxiety over issues of how can we actually maintain this going forward. To be quite frank with you, I mean, looking at our programs here, they're very distinguished. We're very accomplished in what we do, but we're probably going to end up going through what I consider a little bump in the road, where we're probably going to have to reduce temporarily the number of students that we can actually sustain just until we can figure, at the PhD level, just until we can figure out what the new model will look like and where those new revenues are going to come from to allow us to attain some new steady state. So within this community of research universities, we're all talking about it as what's the new normal going to become. We know it's be very different than where we were over the last 10 or 15 years. We're going to have to move in a new direction.
And do you drive that from the industry, the organizations, or the hiring universities out? So in other words, do you have sort of a demand of certain areas of PhDs, and therefore you'll reinvest in those and maybe pull back on some?
This is where I work. I mean, my job as a graduate school dean is honestly to be a spokesperson and an advocate, to work to advance agendas that are coming from the individual deans of the discipline-based schools. So I work as sort of their agent on their behalf to advance graduate education. And I have to work with them to understand within their own clusters of disciplines, where are the real demand areas now? And also, if we have a crystal ball, where will the demand be in the future in order for us to know, where should we be making investments? Clearly in a science-y type area, in biotechnology areas, in pharmaceutics, we know there's probably going to continue to be demands there for new innovations that will come that will have an impact on human medicine. So we need to make strategic investments there. So there may be a need to redirect dollars in order to allow those programs to grow, while we have to do reviews of other areas in which we've made investments to find out, can we actually sustain them at the size they were? Do we actually need to think about a temporary reduction in those sizes for PhD students? Or can we come up with other creative models? I mean, quite frankly, we're in the midst of a capital campaign right now, and one of the things that we're looking for are those who are passionate about these areas of scholarship, and we need them as potential donors to understand, whether it's a private donor or a corporation, to understand that this new knowledge comes out of this doctoral research, and we need them to invest in us as well.
So what about our graduate students? Are we preparing them? I know we prepare them well on the skill side. Are there some things maybe we're not doing that we need to be doing more of?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that, our individual scholars, individual faculty here are very good at developing the students in areas that are going to be cutting edge relative to the publications, the books that they're going to put out. Those opportunities are there for them in formation. But where students are asking us for assistance in graduate education are in the things that have to do with what are often called the soft skills, how you communicate, how you present yourself, the use of a variety of communications media, video media like this. I mean, many people right now are actually concerned about the public's lack of knowledge about the excitement and issues that are related to some things that are coming out of the physical or geological or natural science areas. And one of the problems that I think we have is that we're not very good at actually communicating that. So we're looking for opportunities today for the interface between, say, our video program in the Mason Gross School of the Arts, for actually having students learn more about effective use of video as a communications tool for their own type of science that they're doing. So I see that as an emergent area where we can assist students. So we can go into new programmatic efforts like that, but in addition, we need to assist our students individually in all of the things that have to do with your ability to effectively communicate, to present yourself to a lay audience as well as to your peers at a technical meeting, understanding how to read the nonverbal cues to know whether you're communicating your message or not, and what you need to actually explain more clearly if it's sort of giving, somebody's giving you a blank stare in response to that. So all of those things have to go along with this process of formation of scholars. We're still going to be focusing on preparation of distinguished scholars, but we also need to assist them as individuals in their own development. Helping them be those
full professionals.
That's right.
So we have one more minute left, Jerry. If you could give one piece of advice to the PhD students who are out there, the master students who are out there, what piece of advice would you be wanting
It's really understanding and taking ownership of who you are, what's your own particular passion, what drives you, and then be just absolutely persistent in going after that. Don't necessarily let temporary things stand in your way. Reach out and find the assistance that you need. So if you're a Rutgers master's or PhD student, get to the excellent faculty that we have here. Come and talk to us at the graduate school. Our staff at 25 Bishop in New Brunswick are excellent at helping you, not just helping you solve immediate problems about Rutgers issues, but also just sitting and talking about issues that have to do with career, future, where do I go, what is this career opportunity going to provide me in terms of this degree that I have. It's really about finding what your passion is and sticking to that, and we can assist you in achieving those goals. That's what really we're all about in graduate education.
And it's terrific work that you and your team is doing. So
thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Great opportunity.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Breakfast at the Barracks. For more information about any of our topics from today, please visit our website at rutgers.tv. For all of us at Breakfast at the Barracks, I'm Paula Kelliguri. Thanks for watching.